This
Sorry,
conference will now be recorded.
Oh, sorry, Michelle. Yes, yeah. So I was going to give a quick introduction to what we're going to do, sort of go through here today. Before I do that, quick bit of housekeeping. Please can you mute your microphone if you don't want to speak. We are recording this call if you don't mind. If you have any questions, we're going to have a little time for that at the end of each individual session, and also hopefully time for discussion at the end. And if you could make your comments using the comments function rather than perhaps say them, just make things a little bit easier. So the program as it stands at the moment is I'm just going to give a quick introduction as to the kind of issues we're going to be talking about today for 15 minutes. We're then going to have a series of 4 20-minute presentations, firstly looking at technical harmonization using kind of inspired data models given by Fran Schoff at GAIS. We're then going to come back to me to look at sort of countries with no reporting system. So this will look a lot more in detail with regard to the UNFC code and how the UNFC code can be used to harmonize resource information. For countries with no reporting system. We're then going to look at countries with a Russian-style reporting system. It's going to be presented by MBFSZ. And then finally going to finish off with some Norwegian examples where we're going to hear about how NGU have harmonized some of their resource data using UNFC. And then hopefully at the end we'll have some time for discussion. So I'm just going to quickly introduce the ORAMA project, which is going to cover, which has covered a very wide range of aspects and different topics. This session specifically is focused on the harmonization of resource data for resource reserves for primary minerals. Now, there's substantial issues currently within Europe regarding compiling data in these sorts of themes. And this afternoon is going to focus on potential solutions to harmonizing data through resources reserves between sort of European countries. And principally, we're going to be doing this using the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, or your UNFC for short. The ORAMA project has also done an awful lot of work focusing on harmonization of other data types, production, trade, exploration, etc. Awful lot of work on secondary raw materials. We don't have time to cover all this today. There's other webinars which cover some of these issues, or if you're interested in other things, please see the ORAMA website where there's a range of very detailed reports which talk about these subjects. So I'm just going to introduce the issues now, and then sort of we're going to focus in on a little more detail using some practical exercises on some specific examples for countries that have, as I said, no resource code, countries that rely on the Russian system, and then sort of finish off with some case studies. So, with regard resource data in Europe, I think we all know, and it's sort of a given truth, that the EU is highly dependent on mineral raw materials, which are vital for growth for industries, jobs, a really important feedstock for all kinds of industrial processes. Now, data for these minerals is essential for understanding the kind of supply vulnerabilities we have at European level. And also data and harmonization of data is really important for sharing between different European organizations, institutions. If we don't understand kind of the definitions we're talking about, we can't share information. And what's really important, I think, at the moment, and what's really in the spotlight, is to understand the resource potential of Europe, to understand supply vulnerabilities, to understand how perhaps European industries regard battery raw materials, critical metals, things like that. Going forward, we need to understand the geological stocks of raw materials. However, why don't we already understand this? This has been an issue that's been talked about for a long time, and we're still asking these questions. So, there is a lot of information out there in the public domain about geological stocks of raw materials, about mineral resources. The latest one being the Minerals for EU project, which did an excellent job of collecting data for over 40 European countries via a questionnaire. This is all presented on the Minerals for EU portal, but it didn't fill the data gap. We're still asking these questions. So why is that? Why is simply collecting the data, why didn't that work? So the issue we have is we can't compile pan-European figures for mineral resources from this minerals for EU data because, well, firstly, there's many commodities where there's either no data available or data only available for a few commodities. Now, there's not a lot we can really do about that here today, apart from continue to encourage, lots of organisations like geological surveys to produce this data. But something that we are going to talk about today is data was compiled to a very wide variety of different systems reporting, different standards. They aren't comparable, and you can't simply sum them. You've got a huge variety of different type of information that's being collected, from historical estimates from geological surveys to much more modern estimates based on international reporting standards. So when we're talking about resources, we're talking about sort of different things depending on what kind of data we're talking about. So it's kind of meaningless to sum this data, which is the big issue we really have here. And this is not a new issue, as I said. Every project that's trying to do this has come up with these kind of problems. The first example, being ProMine, which people may be familiar with, an excellent project, but again, it came up against the same issues with regarding compiling data. So the solution being, obviously, we need to use a common standard across Europe to do this. To allow comparison between these data sets. Now, there's many different ways to classify mineral resources, and the two most commonly used are UNFC, which is a classification scheme developed by the UN, designed for use at a strategic level by governments for resource management, and also the CRISCO template, which is designed for disclosure principally for stock exchanges at a business level. Now, due to the flexibility of the UNFC and the fact that it's much more focused on national level resource management as opposed to investor confidence, we're proposing, as part of the ORAMA project, that the UNFC could be a tool used to harmonise this data, which is something we're going to sort of focus a lot in this webinar. So a very brief introduction. The UNFC is a code, if you're not familiar with this, a classification scheme that's based on 3 axes, which are socioeconomic viability, project feasibility, geological knowledge. And essentially, you classify resources based on how confident you are with regard to data, with regard to how far the project has progressed along these 3 axes. So although it looks complicated, it in fact is actually comparatively simple. And you can see a slightly different version of that 3D diagram here, where you can see you've got some kind of common stages in a project lifecycle and kind of where they equate to. I'm just going to go through these quickly. We're going to look at these again in a bit more detail later. So you can clearly see here there's gaps for sales, there's a box for non-sales production, you have your commercial projects, your potentially commercial projects, non-commercial projects, and additional quantities in place. And as you understand more data about projects, they will probably move up through these, much as other resource codes, to higher levels of confidence. And exploration results there as well. One thing that's quite handy about UNFC is it's quite easy to bridge with other international standards. So I'm taking an example here of the CRISCO template. And there's plenty of resources on how you can bridge one to the other on the UN website, the UNFC website. If you're interested in this in more detail, we don't really have time to do this in a lot of detail today. But simply you can see here in terms of a JORC or PERC standard, a proved mineral resource will equate to something that's E1, F1, G1, whereas an inferred mineral resource will be E2, F2, G3. And if you have just a mineral reserve, it doesn't differentiate, that will be E1, F1, G1 plus G2. There are also subdivisions, subclassifications within UNFC. We don't really have time to deal with those today, but you can go into more detail. It's also possible to bridge with other standards. Lots of European countries use the Russian standard, which is also Crisco compliant now. And you can see here, there's also templates that you can bridge across two well-known Crisco categories, and these can then be subsequently bridged across to UNFC. So I'm just going to very quickly now illustrate a hypothetical example of kind of what I'm talking about here and how UNFC can help. So if you assume we have 3 identical deposits in 3 separate countries, and we want to compare these, we want to understand how these compare across Europe to understand kind of what our resource potential is. Country A uses the JORC reporting resource code, which is the Australian standard, because this country obviously has a company that floats on the Australian Stock Exchange. Country B uses a national reporting code, which is their own reporting code, which is developed for internal use. But again, you can see that represents something different to the resource we see in country A. And country C, we have a report. We don't have any reporting code, but they have some data for historical estimates for this deposit. So again, it's not comparable to the other 2. So you can see for all these, none of these represent the kind of the total geological stock that all there is. And also, if you add them all together, it's meaningless because they all mean completely different things. They're all essentially 3 completely separate definitions of what we mean when we say resource. So, could the UNFC help to provide a solution? For country A, we can use the bridging document to understand where that is, so we kind of know where that sits within UNFC. And what about the rest of the deposit? So we don't quite know where that is because we need more information about that, but we know that there is a place for that within UNFC. UNFC has a flexibility to do that, unlike perhaps the Crisco compliant codes where we can't classify it because it's not currently economic. So if we knew a bit more about that deposit, we could place that somewhere. Country B, again, there's plenty of flexibility, a range of categories we can use to define that without understanding exactly what that resource code involves, without a bridging document between that resource code and UNFC. I can't quite say where it goes, but there's plenty of flexibility to include it. And if we understood the kind of levels of confidence involved in collating that number, we can classify it. And the rest might go in here in the kind of exploration results section. And finally, country C, again, you need more information to understand where that kind of fits, what the kind of data that's gone into that survey, how much drilling, how much economic assessment. But you need to do this with any kind of resource code. And there's plenty of flexibility within UNFC to do that. So it could be any one of these different categories, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail later. But you can see there's plenty of flexibility to do it, and we can classify it. So ultimately, you might end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So before we had 3 completely separate definitions of resources. Now we've got numbers to UNFC categories that are kind of comparable. And we can compare exactly what we mean when we're talking about these figures and these resources in these 3 separate deposits. They now all report the same way, so we kind of know what we're talking about when we say, we have 20,000 tons of resources. And then we can actually now start to sum these as well to understand our resource potential, how much we actually have, and kind of what these really represent in terms of accessibility, geological stocks, timelines of when we might be able to access these kinds of materials. So we've seen that the UNFC can accommodate uneconomic and undiscovered resources, including early stage exploration, and give a very full picture of mineral stocks. There's several bridging documents which already do exist between UNFC and other codes and standards, which is really handy. UNFC is being considered for mineral resource inventories in some countries and is being used as an official standard in several. You can see here, this is the kind of existing situation within Europe, within terms of what codes are used in different countries. So you can see there's only 2 countries here which actually do use UNFC. I think that's Lithuania and Romania. But yeah, it is being used, and lots of other countries are also using, beginning to sort of consider this and convert some of their data to this and explore this as an issue. But you can see one thing this picture does show is most countries do not. Most countries have their own standards or used other international standards. So there is a significant issue there with regard to UNFC. I think it's fair to say that it's as UNFC's classification, it doesn't include rules relating to stock exchanges, relating to governments. They're not accepted by stock exchanges, so it's unlikely to be taken up, I think, in the near term by publicly listed companies, which are the primary data providers. However, I don't really think this is a problem. It's not really designed for this purpose, whereas other standards and codes are, much more suitable for that kind of application. So we need to focus on the kind of data that we're using it for, which is kind of these national level inventories. As a result, you need to bridge data across from the data compiled by primary producers, which is possible, as we've seen. And it's also very important that the UNFC fits in with existing European data standards, such as Inspire, data models that are used to compile this information to ensure interoperability. And we'll look at that in a lot more detail next. So I think it's fair to say that UNFC is seen as sometimes as unnecessary or overcomplicated. Lots of countries already have a reporting standard which they're happily using. I think one thing we're advocating is that's fine, but I think we need to consider bridging across to UNFC for when we report on a kind of pan-European level. I think the free access approach can sometimes appear to make it complicated. However, actually, when you actually look at it, it's actually not as complicated as perhaps you might think. And one thing the ORAMA project is trying to do is produce lots of resources, training materials to kind of aid users in kind of using this, in improving their data. And again, these are all on the ORAMA website in a lot more detail if you're interested. So that's all I have to say as the introduction. If you're interested in this subject, there's going to be another workshop in the World Resources Forum, 22nd October. Again, there's the final ORAMA event on the 22nd November in Brussels during War Materials Week, so please come along to that. And as mentioned, this webinar, the recording of this webinar, plus all the various training materials can be found on the ORAMA website as well. And if they're not up there at the moment, they will be there in the coming weeks and months. So thanks very much for your attention. One final thing I'll say is please provide us with feedback. There's a link to the feedback form. That'll be very grateful. And this is contact details of all the presenters you can hear from today. So that is what I have to say for the moment. And I will pass over to my colleague Franz, who will present next, talking about data models and Inspire standards.
Hans, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everybody. My name is Franz Schürt. I'm presenting this technical harmonization using Inspire data model. I try to make some complex as easy as possible, so I hope you can follow it. Next slide. Yeah. The database for raw materials in Europe is Inspire compliant Minerals for EU database. Sometimes we call it M4EU database. It's developed by projects Minerals for EU, EU-RARE, and ProSum. we use unified model language, and there's 60 tables with features and data, and 70 tables with code list, and more than 7,000 codes, but about 5,000 are minerals names. So yeah, and the current version is 1.12, and we are working on the next version in short time to be version 2.0. Just an overview in the ORAMA project, we are looking on already existing data platforms, the knowledge data platforms, and try to improve the data. So we are looking on the data in the ORAMA using Inspire directive on all the provided data platforms, and we send some recommendation to Mintel for EU, and then after ORAMA project, they will take over to send it to EDGI portal. And within the Mintel for EU, the automated e-minerals yearbook also will be operational. This is just an overview of the what we call the whole system. Here down at left, we have the national data providers, and this will be pushed through a web feature service and harvested by GeoZS, and then the dump will be sent to BGS so they can update some production data from the e-minerals yearbook, and this will be sent back to the diffusion database at the BRGM. We had some actions we were looking at, try to improve the model, and also how to improve more use of UNFC classifications. And there have been some updates through the Earth Resource ML, ERML, as well. And we also want to push this modification to the Inspire validation process. So we are in contact with JRC and ISPA as well. Just an overview of a part of the data model. We have UNSC classification here below the OR measure on the same level as reserve and endowment and resources. And we have also bridging our codes, you see as a term, together with the UNFC coding. So it should be easy to understand the coding we are using in Minerals for EU. We also want to improve, we put total production on because the other tables wouldn't tell anything about the total production. So there's a new table we want to put in, and also some product commodity measure needs some improvement between some tables. And this is electronic mineral yearbook. That's a data model which will be implemented in the Minerals for EU. So every data provider, they can put in their data into the model, and then afterwards send to BGS to put in the production data, and then we get a total mineral book for Minerals for EU data. And just to show the schema where the data, the way the data is pushed through the system. And how does Minerals for EU model core looks like? It was developed by Minerals for EU and EURA, and we have some key tables called mining feature occurrence and mineral occurrence table. And what you see in orange is feature types, and in yellow is data type tables. And just to show, we also have a mining waste extension. Sorry, it's a mine waste extension connected to mineral occurrence table. The green one is the mining extension to the Inspire model, because mining waste was not in the core of Inspire directive. And to make it easy to insert data into this database, there has been developed some guidelines, insert data guidelines. And for those who does not have set up the system, there's also a total of 6 guidelines on how to set up the whole system. First install in the database, and then set up the web feature service, and how to input data into a database. But here we talk about how to insert data in the mineral occurrence table. And this guideline has 17 steps. And this is actually a simple table relation between mineral occurrence, which consists of the geometry and all the other tables that have more or less informations. And in green highlighted is a mandatory table to fill out, and in blue surroundings there's this imported data types you have to put in, but the others is at your options to fill in if you have the informations. But the mandatory and important tables, they should at least be filled in. And just to show, the mineral occurrence table has 51 attributes, many code lists referenced. And in order to have a view on which code list table do I need to look in to get the overall codes, I made this reference attributes of a code list table. And a lot of them are void reason type. And the reason for putting void reason is that if you don't have information on a death information, then you need to put in a reason why you don't have it. That's why we have a lot of void reason. But to show what a code list looks like, I have I also made a recipe on how to fill in data. And here there's 21 steps from A to U, so you can see which row you need to fill in. And I had taken one code list table called occurrence type. And you here on the left, that's codes, and then some naming and description, and also URL where you can look up the description on it in Inspire registry. And there's also a spreadsheet you can download to look at all the codes easily. These 70 code lists available. And also how to insert data in the mine table. This guideline has only 3 main steps, but this is more complicated, as you can see in this overview. The red surrounded is those who has geometry, and the green indicates mandatory to fill in, and the blue one will definitely improve the information in the database. And there's some constraint called exclusive OR. That means in the mining feature occurrence table, it can only reference one of the tables: mining activity, and mining waste. So if you want to have information in mining activity and mining waste, you need actually 3 records in the mining feature. You can have the same geometry, no problem there, but there's a constraint you have to take into account. It's not implemented in database has been shown some challenging there. So that's why we emphasize this exclusive ORAMA. There's also one on mineral occurrence and mineral producing country in connection with the mining activity. Excuse me. And the mine table has actually a lot of code list, and you see the reference to the code list here, and then the recipe here on how to fill in. And I'll show you a code list from mine status type. You see it here. The code is status, and the descriptions and URL you can read outside. It's in the code list table in the database, but you can also look at it in the provided spreadsheet. So now I'll summarize, maybe a bit fast, but the summary is setting up the whole system, use a two-stack guideline, and on how to insert data, use these provided guidelines, and some DB database knowledge and some IT knowledge is perhaps necessary. The code list you can look in the database or in the spreadsheets, and you need a mineral expert to quality control and quality assure your data, and an IT guy to keep the whole system running as a web feature service. And here are some important links, as Tom also provided previously, so on how to download, and you can see all the guidelines here provided. And thank you for that. And then I will pass over to Tom. And how do I do that?
Also, I mean, if we've probably got 5 minutes now, if anyone's got any questions for Franz, please use the comments box. Otherwise, we'll crack on.
Okay, Tom, you are now the presenter.
Okay, thank you very much.
Seems no question. So maybe you should just carry on,
Yep.
Tom, and
Okay.
then and if any question occurs, I will just answer them.
Okay, well, so we'll have time at the end. Right, so I'm going to talk about bridging across various different data types to UNFC, and how we can use UNFC, and how it kind of works with sort of various different data types that we, the British Geological Survey, have come across when I'm undertaking this exercise. I'm going to present a kind of worked example, a sort of practical exercise, which we have used workshops in the past. We don't have a huge amount of time today to kind of go through this in the detail and kind of work through it, but you'll kind of see the kind of general gist. And again, if you're interested in a copy of this worked exercise, I don't think it's available on the ORAMA website yet, but it will be in the near future. So the kind of most common data types which we kind of come across with regard to resources are kind of estimates based on Crisco-aligned codes, estimates based on the Russian state system, which is now Crisco-aligned, although is kind of fundamentally different to kind of JORC and PERC and the kind of other ones like that. and other national reporting codes. So some countries develop their own codes for various different reasons, for the suit their own purposes, and we often see those as well.
Tom,
Something
I
else.
don't see the screen.
Sorry, Franz, you didn't see the screen.
I don't see your screen.
Okay, hang on a minute.
You have to maximize your screen time. Put a little.
Can you see it now?
No, we can see the presentation, but it's the small version. You have to.
Okay. I wonder if that's because I
Next to the Zoom button.
Sorry.
The icon next to the Zoom button, you can press it.
Zoom button. So that's obviously
this one.
Yeah.
Press
Is that working now? Is that working?
No.
I wonder if it's because I share the way I'm showing the screen. I don't quite know what to do, to be honest. Obviously, unless I pass the control back and then try again.
I will take the control and then pass it to you. If you
Okay,
want.
yeah. Okay. Let's try again.
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry about that. Let's put that down there. Right, so yes, and the other thing we have, just to recap, is something that certainly I come across a lot of the British Geological Survey, and I think other geological surveys also deal with a lot of this sort of thing, is historic estimates. So work that's been done in the past, possibly by companies, possibly by academics, which may not comply to any kind of particular code or standard. So we kind of covered this briefly, but how to classify in UNFC. So again, if you're interested in this, there's a huge amount of resources available on the UNFC website, and I recommend you look at that if you want more information. But one thing we've done as part of the ORAMA project is develop 3 separate flow sheets looking at there's 3 separate categories to kind of give you an idea of a decision-making tool to kind of classify according to UNFC. And these kind of, we've developed these in mind, the sort of the kind of data that we've come across, the British Geological Survey. They perhaps might not work quite so well with kind of the Russian style codes, which are a lot more prescriptive, use a lot more definitive language. But I think they're a very good learning aid. They're a very good tool to use. And you know, if you have any feedback, we're welcome to hear it. But you know, it doesn't give a definitive answer, but it does give you know, a useful tool. So you can see here, here's the one we developed for the e-axis. And again, these are not on the ORAMA website at the moment, but they will be shortly. And you can see there's sort of detailed criteria based on various different points in the kind of life cycle of a project. You know, you kind of, it sort of tells you the information you kind of need to know when you're dealing with these things. Kind of, you know, is there feasibility studies, their planning permission, funding level. Obviously, e-axis is the socioeconomic factors. Again, you have the F-axis, the technical feasibility. So again, it shows you what you need to know. Are there operating mines? Are there data to international standards? Things like feasibility studies, processing studies. And if you know these things, you should be able to classify it. And I'll use these in a little while into practical examples. And finally, the G-axis, which is the geological certainty, which is perhaps something I know more about than as a geologist than perhaps the other two. But it is perhaps sometimes the one with the most uncertainty. If you're talking about geological certainty, that can be very variable. It can involve quite a subjective decision sometimes. We've tried to kind of cover that as much as we can with this, but ultimately, this does require expert knowledge to classify these, and decisions which can sometimes be subjective, as is always the case when dealing with geological interpretation. So I'm just going to go through 3 exercises now, looking at 3 very different mineral deposits and how we've classified them according to UNFC. So the first one is an example of a place called Gairloch in Scotland. That's a volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit, Archean metamorphic rocks. It's in the Northwest Highlands. There has been mineral exploration. A company did extensively explore for copper, zinc, and gold in the 1980s. They drilled a total of 87 boreholes with over 9 kilometers of drill core, so a substantial effort. And they identified stratiform mineralization around sort of 4 meters thick over a decent area around a kilometer. They come up with a resource figure that's sort of quoted in various historical reports. And we can sort of find that now in the BGS archives. But however, we have no real information. We know that they did undertake all this exploration, but we don't really understand quite how they developed that resource estimate. It's not to any current standards. We don't quite know the data they used to compile that, which is not ideal. So you can see, we want to use this number though. This is a number reported by industry. It's an important copper gold deposit, so we want to include this in our inventory of geological stocks. But quite how do we classify this? And you can see here, this is the kind of how we've done it. We've given this a UNFC category of 3, 3, 3. So that's the kind of lowest ratings really can give for the E and the F axis, but not the G axis. We certainly have some level of geological certainty there. And that's based on there's a moderate amount of drilling and local exploration, but not really information about how the estimate's made. So I'm just going to go through the flow sheets now to show you how we've used those to kind of come up with that number. So for the E criteria, is an operating mine? Well, no, there isn't. Is there or has there been a mining project? Well, yes, there has, because obviously there's been this significant exploration project. Does this have data published with an international standard? No, it certainly doesn't. Is a mine fully permitted? Is it permitted? Nope. Is the project socially acceptable? Well, we don't really have the required information to say it is or it isn't. But regardless of that, we're going to get the same answer anyway. So, maybe it may be acceptable, probably isn't. But regardless of whether it is or isn't for this, we're going to reach the same conclusion. Because the next box asks us, is it likely to be permitted in the foreseeable future? Well, seeing as no one's really kind of done any modern exploration on this, I think the answer is a definitive no. We can say for that. Therefore, it's going to be E3. The F-axis, again, this is very similar. There's no operating mine, but there has been a project. Doesn't have anything according to international standards, nor does it has a feasibility study conducted for it. So again, it's quite simple. That's going to be F3. Now the G-axis. Is there an operating mine? No, there isn't. But again, there has been a project which doesn't have any data to international standards. But there has been a significant amount of drilling and sampling. So we can say, yes, there has been actually a significant investigation there. Next, we consider, is the drilling and sampling sufficient to define with confidence the distribution and abundance of ore within the deposit? Now, this is a very subjective question because, of course, if is drilling sufficient will very much depend on the type of deposit, because you obviously will need more drilling for more complex deposits. So this is when you need to engage some level of geological expertise here. But in this case, I don't think it's really quite enough to kind of really define with confidence the abundance of ore within this deposit. Especially because we don't really know in this case quite how much information was included in the estimate. So erring on the side of caution, I think there might be yes. Perhaps if we knew, perhaps if we knew more about how they came up with the number, we might say yes. Finally, has the exploration been insufficient to define with confidence the distribution and abundance within the deposit? So I think yes, it's insufficient. The previous reasons given. So we're going to say G3 there. And it would have been G4 if there had been no exploration taken or exploration had been at a lower level. So that's a historic number for a metallic deposit. Next, we're going to look at what was until recently a currently operating mine. So this is a very different example. This is a Drakelands tungsten tin mine in Devon, which is a very large, low-grade deposit. It's had a very long history of development, kind of sort of open pit style workings. And you can see some kind of pictures of the operation there. So this was initially discovered in the kind of 1860s, so significantly long time ago. There was sporadic production during both the First and Second World War, principally due to security supply issues at the time. But there was nothing really seriously done until the 1980s, where there was a feasibility study. They produced some good solid resource numbers. They had permission to mine, but it wasn't taken forward due to the crash in the tin price. And then nothing happened until 2007, when it was acquired by another company. They produced a JORC-compliant estimate. Mine operations commenced in 2014. However, unfortunately, the mine closed in 2018 due to financial difficulties of the parent company and also issues they were having with kind of technical aspects with regard to mineralogy and extracting the minerals from the ore in the processing plant. However, there is still permission in place until 2036. So quite a complicated history. We've got a lot of numbers for that adhere to sort of JORC standards, and we also have a resource estimate from 1982, which was sort of not done to any kind of known standard. So how do we classify these? Well, to start off with, we can use our bridging document to bridge from the JORC numbers across to UNFC. Again, quite straightforward. So we have a proved mineral resource here. So we know that's going to be a 111, for example. And I won't go through all of them, but you can undertake a mapping exercise like that. However, what's very important to note is, of course, this demonstrates how, especially when you're dealing with higher confidence numbers, and especially with JORC and CRISCO compliant codes, the way these don't necessarily represent geological stocks. These are dynamic economic entities, and they're a snapshot in time. So that 111 is correct from when the JORC estimate was done in 2011. However, we know now the mine's closed, and it's closed due to financial reasons and technical reasons. So we will therefore may want to consider adjusting both the E category and the F category due to those changes in those financial and technical considerations. However, of course, in terms of geology, nothing's changed there. But the categories do change because now this is now less economically feasible, less technically feasible than it once was. And you can see there, so for all these numbers, we are now required to consider changing some of these axes to reflect the new reality. And we also have this resource estimate of 333, and that's done on exactly the same basis as the Gareloch example. So we now have a third example of a polyhalite resource in northeast England. So this there's two commodities of interest here. There's potash and there's polyhalite. Potash is a single mineral. Polyhalite is a mixture of potassium-bearing minerals, very valued to their fertilizer applications. There's been a lot of interest in this in recent years. They're hosted in late Permian evaporite deposits, buried very deeply under the North Sea. There's one operating mine operated by Cleveland Potash, which now works polyhalite, and there's a second mine which is under development. We have probable reserve figures for the Woodsmith mine, which is under development, and we have measured resource figures for the Bulby mine, which is the operating one. So there's a mixture of data, of reported data here, and you can see, again, we have this issue of data gaps because some companies don't necessarily report all the data, and we have to accept there's a data gap there. We can do our best to try and get out of the industry, but otherwise there's not a lot we can do unless there's legislation that requires them to report, which there isn't in this case. So we have indicated inferred resources as well, which have aggregated for two deposits in terms of this. And something else we've done in terms of this is a estimate for the total extent of the geological availability of resources. So a kind of regional resource assessment based on some basic geological assumptions. So those are the numbers we've got. How do we convert them to UNFC? And again, you can see we've got JORC compliant numbers. It's a bit of a mix here, and I said we've got no reserves for the Bulby mine, although we know there must be reserves there because they're currently undertaking it. So unfortunately, a data gap, which needs to be recognised, but it's certainly not in the remit of a geological survey to estimate the reserves of a specific site. Well, at least it's not in our remit at BGS. So there's nothing we can do about that. I have to accept there's a data gap there. But we can use the bridging table to bridge those Crisco numbers across to UNFC classes. So that's a simple exercise I'm trying to take. And then we have this estimate based on subcrop. Now, this is very interesting. We're given this an example of 334. This is a kind of classification you often see. This is almost the lowest common denominator for kind of these kind of geological estimates. But this kind of thing is typical, I think, of the kind of data the lower geological surveys deal with, as this is a kind of district scale based regional assumption. So I'll go through this now, how we've developed that. So is there an operating mine? So in this case, I'm going to say no, because of course there is an operating mine and there's also a project. We know that, but in terms of this regional estimate, this doesn't include what's in the operating mines. We know that because we have their JORC numbers for that. This estimate is based on the broad extent of the geological formation and data we have from boreholes and extrapolating the two. So it's not really reliant on the operating mine. So we can't really use the fact there's an operating mine there to give confidence to this. So again, has exploration been carried out that includes systematic drilling, sampling and analysis in appropriate depth? Well, the answer has to be no. There certainly hasn't. Obviously there has for operating mines, but that data has not been included in this estimate. So therefore, very simple, resource will be G4. Simply, this is the lowest common denominator. We just don't have the data to really say anything else.
Okay, I will find it. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. So, and that's all I have to say on those. Those are those three examples. I've done those really quite quickly. But if you're interested in doing those, in kind of having a think about that yourselves, or do that in more detail, please have a look at those on the website. And of course, like I said, these are our assumptions we've made using the best knowledge that we have. But it can be subjective. This can be based on geological interpretation or based on your own knowledge of technical feasibility of various projects. So it can be subjective. So if you have any come to a different answer, I'm happy to sort of discuss that with this particular example. But that's what I have to say for the moment. So if anyone has any comments, we can discuss it now, or we can discuss it at the end, or questions based on that. No? Excellent. Well, in that case, I will pass over to Zoltan, who will talk about looking at something similar, but with the Russian type resource code. Okay, Zoltan, I'm just passing it over to you now.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I try to share the screen. Okay. Okay, can you see?
It's perfect.
Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our team in the Mining and Geological Survey of Hungary, in this presentation, I would like to show some examples of the methodology of data harmonization that was developed for countries in Central Eastern Europe, where the so-called traditional or the Russian type classification is the base of the mineral resource classification, reporting, and development of the inventory. The data harmonization will be explained, and after reference on international systems and links between them, some Hungarian case studies for aggregates and clay will be presented. Based on open publication, examples from Poland and Czech Republic will be introduced. Finally, I'll summarize results. When we are talking about data harmonization for raw materials in national and international systems, basically we are looking for relationship between the national classification methodology, national reporting and national inventory, and international reporting standards and the United Nations classification framework. Nowadays it is called United Nations Resource Management System. In Europe, we have to take into consideration the INSPIRE as the information framework as well. These elements support the development of a joint language for raw materials. At the beginning, relevant codes and UNFC were translated into Hungarian language. You see the CRIRS code template that deals with mineral resources and reserves on a transparent way and provides a list of criteria that are used for identifying modifying factors. Here, the role of competent persons is crucial. George Perk are members of this CRIRS code family, and for geothermal energy, the relevant code is also based on CRIRS code concept. The UN classification framework deals with projects and don't use resources and reserves. There are other important, let's say, standards, for example, for hydrocarbons, like the Petroleum Resource Management System. Here you can see the bridging between UNFC, nowadays called UNRMS, and CRIRS code type reporting. So links between reporting codes and UN resource management system is well done. In the CRIRS code system, resources can be developed to reserves if all modifying factors are fulfilled, like legal issues with permissions, processing, economic and social considerations, but infrastructure and the intention of a government can also be a factor. UNFC recently is voluntary, logical with 3 axes, as it was mentioned, geological knowledge and potential, category G, feasibility, category F, and social economic viability, E. The comprehensive system for all types of minerals and anthropogenic resources are developed by the UNES EGRM in Geneva. In the ORAMA project, experience of this national project for data harmonization was integrated into the baseline assessment and into the guidance as well. Led by our survey, our goal is to facilitate the modernization of the national mineral resource inventory by harmonization with international reporting codes and the UNFC for all types of minerals. It's a real teamwork with proper discussion with stakeholders. These are the most important steps to develop such a project and provide proper results. After the translation of relevant documents, relationships and links should be mapped and provide bridging between them. Stakeholder consultations serve a good base to be able to publish results and demonstrate the applicability with cases. The next step is development of a guidance that may support the implementation of the methodology. This is, let's say, our bridging document with general overview of international and national systems and description of methodology for data harmonization with case studies on national level that may facilitate EU regional and EU level processes as well. On the link, you may see results on energy minerals and for aggregates and industrial minerals. Let's see briefly how the Hungarian mineral resource classification operates. This is based on the Russian type system that is also called the traditional one in Central Eastern Europe. In order to present the text on a transparent way, on the next slide, you see the visual summary of the classification that is also used in reporting, and this is the base of the national inventory as well. This is maintained by the Mining and Geological Survey of Hungary. The best knowledge is for category E, where the extrapolation is forbidden, hydrogeology and structure of the deposit is well known, sampling may be derived from mining activity, and boreholes have full geophysical lodging. The uncertainty is about 10%. In the category B, we have less knowledge, and the hydrogeology and structural setting are weaker with lodging only in the half of the boreholes. The uncertainty is about 20%. If we go to C1 and C2, to all knowledge decrease with increasing uncertainty. The role of a competent expert and authority who accept the report is crucial. Based on the CRISCO Russian bridging document, this figure shows our guideline from the national classification system through the CRISCO and to the UNFC. You can see that A plus B go to measure resources with modifying factors to proved reserves and to UNFC 111. Less complex deposits can go to measured resources, but more complex resources indicated ones, then to probable reserves. Finally, to the UNFC 112 we arrive. C2 has chance only to go indicated resources. The available UNFC CRISCO bridging makes the harmonization easy, but of course, detailed analysis is needed. Here you can see the general table for bridging, which was also presented earlier, and also some Hungarian keys. So we go into details in the Hungarian case. Blue tables represent some specific keys. On the left, the status of the mine is aligned with CRISCO and UNFC. On the right, the national geological knowledge is correlated with the two systems. Now I show you some cases. For an active clay mine, here with Brick Factory, the national inventory show A plus B and C1 and C2. Based on the fact that the structure is not a complex one, E plus B with C1 go together to prove reserves. That means UNFC 111. C2 can be harmonized with probable reserves. It means UNFC 112. For a suspended sand quarry, for a homogeneous sand deposit, we have C1 that is not reserved but goes to measure resource. It means UNFC 221. For a closed or abandoned mine, if we have steel deposits with C1 and C2 categories, C1 goes to measured resources 221 in the UNFC, and C2 goes to indicated resources 222. If we have an exploration area here for gravel, the estimation is in category C2 that goes to indicated resource, which means UNFC 222. As a summary, here you can see the previously mentioned examples together. We have maintained the development of projects from an active mine to the exploration phase. And this figure demonstrates that this resource management system is a dynamic one, logical, and can also highlight the importance to collect proper geological data that may allow to develop a project to be commercial. Now I show how these detailed assessments can be aggregated on regional level and demonstrate how we start from the national system, then to the CRISCO concept without any modifying factors, then with consideration of modifying factors. Finally, we arrive into the UNFC. The lessons to learn may be this system may support sustainable resource management and planning on regional and national level if we do know what we do have and from which type of construction minerals. Regarding the Czech examples, in the book of mineral commodity summaries of the Czech Republic, there is also a description about the UNFC and basic mapping with the national system. The Czech classifications still include potentially economic reserves, for example, reserves that are currently not recoverable and which are therefore potentially economic resources. The term reserves as used, by contrast, in standard international classification represent only the part of explored resources that are available for immediate or developed extraction. All other registered parts are resources, not reserves, of a given mineral. Here you can see the development of categorization based on an open publication and also the results for part of exploitable, and part of explored economic reserves is green, part of explored potentially economic reserves yellow, and for similar deposits without feasibility and pre-feasibility studies. For Poland, in the annual Minerals Yearbook of Poland, the harmonization is presented between the national system and UNFC. The Polish mineral classification system is based on the Russian one, with A, B, C1, and C2, with relevant national terms, of course. The industrial reserve base and predicted recoverable operational are distinguished within the balanced resources. Recovery coefficient was used also in this system, like in Hungary, and both the reserve base and predicted reserves are presented in the deposit development plan that has features of pre-feasibility study, so the Polish classification system can be compared with other ones through UNFC. It is declared that the full harmonization with international systems codes is not easy, and the development of a guideline is advisable. Here you can see a table for different types of energy and non-energy minerals with data sets based on the national classification system from also an open publication. Data sets were aligned with UNFC as follows. In case of deposits licensed for mining minerals based on project approach could be integrated into the resources 1.1x, 1.2x, into economic resources 2.1x, anticipated economic resources 2.2x, and sub-economic resources and losses 3.1x, 3.2x, anticipated sub-economic resources 3.2x. For deposits beyond concession areas, minerals datasets are integrated into the anticipated economic resources 2.3x and anticipated sub-economic resources 3.3x. As a summary, in these studied countries, there is a data collection and maintenance of minerals, bridging between national and international systems. These countries have national classification system based on a traditional one. Besides differences, I mean minor differences in terminology for resources and reserves, and not the same harmonization concept exists. Theoretically, the systematic national data collection for mineral deposits by geological knowledge point of view and taking into account environmental social viability with the identification of the feasibility of a certain project of mineral exploration or exploitation serve opportunity to develop interoperability between national and international systems. In case of proper information on geological knowledge and potential for mineral resources, the G category of the UNFC can be identified. The state of the project, from the plan of exploration via exploitation to the closure and reclamation, may be described in category F. Permissions, for example, from environmental authority and from the society, I mean local and regional acceptance by communities, settlements, with economic considerations that are reflected in the E category, so these categories can also be identified. Proper authority with expertise can handle the detailed E category. Surveys, agencies, ministries can deal with this topic, and this may contribute to the maintenance of the resource management system. Of course, careful assessment of available data sets of mineral resources is needed with respect to the information base derived from reporting. For example, in Hungary, earlier Geological Institute did it, and recently companies provide data for mineral resources and reserves. National experts can contribute to data harmonization. Here we have informal data set, but the involvement of competent persons or Eurogeologists, this may have additional benefits. This may initiate the improvement of infrastructure, I mean data infrastructure and reporting system. And of course, the legislative part of this process may also be improved. For example, the content of reports and the identification of complexity may be important. What are the benefits? The UNFC is a tool to maintain the state of a project, including resources or reserves, in a logical dynamic system, and can support decision on local, regional, national level development with consideration of environmental and social issues. So it supports the sustainable resource management system with sustainable development goals. The preparation for guidance on national regional level may help to other regions or countries to develop their own national concept for the data harmonization with international systems. This, together with an EU-level guidance, can contribute to the EU-level data harmonization and the maintenance of mineral resources and raw materials. Thank you for your attention. And now I would like to give back
Presenter, make presenter, hozzá kattintottál.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so I have finished. If you have any questions, please. Tom, I tried to give you back.
Nem némítottad le magad? Oh, jó.
Yeah, okay, I've got the screen again, but I'm just going to pass this straight to Henrik now. It's going to talk about some examples from NGU, if no one's got any points they'd like to raise after that.
Yes, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me. Let me just start by apologizing for any ambient noise. This is the best I could do. My name is Henrik Sjællerup. I'm from the Geological Survey of Norway. The title in the agenda for my talk is actually Fennoscandian UNFC examples, but the exercises I'm going to walk you through are Norwegian. So the work I'm going to present here is straddling the ORAMA and the Mintel for EU projects. You can say that ORAMA's motivation has been mainly system harmonization. Mintel for EU is aimed more at sort of testing and piloting the deposit coding, but also national and cross-national aggregation. So I'm going to show you two widely different examples for classification, and I'm also going to present some of our aggregation challenges because they're also evident. Just to say it from the beginning as well, I'm not a UNFC expert, and much of what is presented is suggestive, so you may have complaints. Our UNFC coding is still work in progress. So our motivation, yes, how do we flag important resources of possible future value if they have not been assessed in detail? It means if nobody has been working with them in detail, how do we make them visible? How do we sort of count their value in our systems? And how can geological surveys work around reporting code restrictions in order to visualize a country's full mineral endowment? For many geological surveys, most geological surveys, the reporting codes are outside their mandate, so they're very difficult to handle. And still, we want to illustrate everything we have. We want to show if it's possible to aggregate data across widely different levels of knowledge. Some you have commercial projects, you have full assessments, but you also want to include your potential resources in your mineral inventory for future sort of strategy. Will geological surveys be able to consistently use a resource management system such as UNFC across all types of mineral resources? This is our ambition. We need to not only, we have been talking a lot about metals, but it's not only metals, it's also industrial minerals and construction materials that we want to include in this kind of system. And how do we aggregate data for national and cross-national inventories? That's also a challenge. Well, I'm not going to bury you in geology. I'm just arguing my way up and down the G-axis now to start with. And the first case is an exploration target in southwest Norway. The region is well known for its titanium resources, mainly ilmenite deposits, and the biggest ilmenite or titanium producer in Europe is located here. These ilmenite deposits are mainly hosted by these blue rocks, which are Proterozoic and orthosites. But in the late 90s, it was realized that some of the lithologies in this in the layered intrusion in here called the Bjerkreim-Sogndal intrusion, it's a green and red stuff in the middle here, was actually enriched in the phosphate mineral apatite. And subsequent investigation shows that the same lithologies were also enriched in ilmenite, which is titanium raw material, and it was also enriched in vanadium-rich magnetite. So, and in significant areas, we had, well, more than 30% of lithology is made up by these three sort of value minerals. So this is how it looks in detail. So again, I'm not burying you in geology, but I need to show you some detail. In the late 1990s, the survey identified 3 continuous zones of some 10 to 150 meter wide width, carrying apatite, ilmenite, and vanadium magnetite. Of these, the one indicated here, Zone C, is the most exposed and investigated, and it's the most extensive, and it's the only one that I'm going to sort of dwell by. Geology is very predictable in this intrusion, and it's repeated, and it's mappable stratigraphy in here, and it's exposed in a simple sin form. So the mineralizations are actually essentially tracing the rims of a deep source or a couple of these stack of deep sources located in here. You have a photo of these apatite-rich rocks at your bottom right. Again, this is just to illustrate. You're not able to resolve what I'm showing here. But this zone C is 8.5 kilometers long, defined by more than 25% of apatite plus ilmenite plus magnetite. It has been sort of extensively surface sampled. It has also been drilled in 2 places by the Geological Survey. So from a surface expression, this zone is fairly well described as a prospect, which is generally as far as the survey will go in investigating possible targets. The remaining part is up to the industry. But if we looking at the surface area, we end up in a resource area. Now this is a stratified resource, so it's actually the stratigraphic thickness of the mineralizations, 30 to 90 meters. The average is maybe 8.5 kilometers long, so a total area of 2.5 to 700,000 square meters, with 10% apatite, 12% ilmenite, and 7% vanadium magnetite. So, and the vanadium content in the magnetite is significant. So, to make any interesting. And the magnesium content in ilmenite is important to the price and the quality of the titanium raw material. So what a company should do here is to constrain maybe tonnages to raise grades or lower grades and get higher tonnages if that is what they want. So geology in summary. Zone C is the only one I have been talking about. You see it's number 3, but the other 2 are similar, but a little bit less investigated. But they have all been mapped and sampled. With the predictable geology, you can easily argue that it's possible to extrapolate down to, for instance, 100 meters depth. This will leave us with a volume estimate, which I will come back to based on the aerial extent that you can see here. However, without drilling and further sampling, quantities cannot be estimated with more than a low level of confidence. The increased knowledge on Zone C is not enough to increase the G score, so everything here is actually categorized as G3. In terms of the F-axis, this is mainly the maturity of the project. I can just repeat what has happened there. It's been mapped and sampled in the early 2000s by the Geological Survey of Norway in a collaboration with Norsk Hydro. Today they are Yara, the fertilizer company, early 2000s. We drilled in a couple of short drill holes in 2004. There was an interest from a Finnish exploration company in 2007 and some more sampling and some analysis. Then the mineralizations were claimed and held without activity from 2011, but from 2017, money has actually been invested to try to assess the project. So it's currently an active exploration project covering all zones in the intrusion, and the aim is to generate a compliant assessment of the resources. So drilling and geophysics have not been undertaken, but they are planned. So that means that we are in an exploration stage project. The feasibility of extraction has not yet been documented at all zones. We have been classifying to F3. In terms of the E-axis, it's pretty straightforward, so to speak. It's intensely farmed, the area. So farming area mainly with grass, sheep and cattle. There's a small nature reserve, as you can see in the bottom figure. It's small, but it's like right on top of the mineralization. There's a lot of infrastructure. The E39, the main southern Norwegian high road, is going through the area. There's a railroad going parallel with this. So there's a lot of infrastructure as well, but there appears to be still room to mine, if that should be the case. Currently the most challenging situation is the planning of a new 4-lane motorway through the area. There's three different routes are in play, and of course the company working down there is trying to argue for the southern route, but we don't know yet. So there are several actually unresolved land use issues in play here as well. So this means that economic viability has not yet been determined due to unresolved land use issues. So in due time, this maybe happen rather sooner than later, maybe the project should move either into E2 with the documented viability, or to E33, which is non-viable project. So we have estimated the tonnages down to 100 meters depth. So it's and the classification is similar for all of the zones. You can see we have about 330 million tons of ore carrying apatite, ilmenite, vanadium, magnetite. They are all classified as E3.2, F3, and G3. Now we are moving into something rather different. The next example concerns construction material, in this case it's gravel. Norway has around 1,000 extraction sites for construction materials, and the picture is much more volatile than it is for instance, metals and industrial minerals. So in the national perspective, for strategy and planning, coding and managing deposits and deposits of construction materials, is probably more important than, for instance, for metals. The situation may be different if you look at cross-national scales, but at least for the national planning, the coding is really important. So gravel is an important but diminishing type of resource, and we are going to look at a deposit area also in southwest Norway called Forsand. Here you see it on our quaternary maps. These gravel deposits are associated with glacial fluvial sediments. So here we are, southwest Norway. The closest town is Stavanger. I can try to use my cursor here. So Stavanger is here. Forsand, the area we're looking at, is down here. So we have been UNFC classifying this deposit using a number of sources. Of course, our own database, which includes the maps. And in the map you see below, you can see the documented resources or the well-mapped resources are the stronger yellow color, and the inferred stuff is in a brighter color. I've been looking into the application, which has gone to the Directorate of Mining, applications for mining concessions, and we've also been looking into the local municipality area plans. And there's a regional plan for resource management, which has also been consulted. So similar to the picture before, everything from B to J is actually, we have called it confirmed resources. So these are well-mapped resources, and only the area A on the western part and the K, the northeastern part, are on uncertain resources, or have uncertain extents. So this is just to keep you in mind that drilling is generally not performed when you assess this kind of resource, and this requires that we think a little bit different when we allocate G codes to this kind of deposit. I will return to that in a minute, but basically everything from B to J are well-known deposits. The municipal land use plan is shown here. It's unfortunately in Norwegian, but you'll get the picture here. The municipality has been assessing the deposits for us, the viability at least, and has classified which part of the area will be viable for future extraction. And they have based their conclusions on a balanced evaluation of, I'm just translating from here, from location, consequences for society, consequences for the environment, consequences for other resources. In this case, it's farming and water. And the whole evaluation by the municipality results in a conclusion, which you can see for this case at the bottom. It's green. Future extraction is possible. So we're looking here actually at the area in the circle above, the C and D area. They're both properly regulated. And for area D, there is an application for a mining concession, which has been submitted. So we have a viable situation, and we have application in on one of the areas. So we have E2 for C, and we have E1.1 for D. Just to make another example, which goes the other way, so to speak, we also have areas where extraction will not be feasible. This is the area B up on the map on your top right, and due to housing near the possible extraction sites, the conclusion is that it is not relevant to extract resources from this area. We have classified this as E3.2, which is, well, economic viability cannot be determined, but it could actually just as well be E3.3. Development is not economically viable. So when it comes to the F-axis, current extraction is taking place in two of the areas. They are going into F1.1. There's a mining concession in place for two other areas, C and E. They go into F1.2. There's a land use plan approved for future extraction with no application launched in area D. That goes into F2.3. And then there's no current or planned action in the last 5 areas you see at the bottom. They will be F4. This is for a different reason. It's for housing. It's for nature protection. It's for farming, and it's also for cultural heritage in these areas. So they will not be. They are not feasible. So we can set this up in a table. E and F I've sort of discussed in detail for the last couple of slides. The G I promised to return to. We have actually well-mapped resources in all areas apart from A and K. We estimate with a high confidence level to have resources or have a gravel layer which is at least 8 meters deep. So that will give us an 8 meter thick G1 resource in those areas. We have designated a medium confidence situation for extending these resources up to 10 meters. That will give us an additional 2 meters of G2 resources, and we have a low confidence that these resources will actually be 25 meters thick. So that will give us an additional 15 meters of G3 resources. So that's the basic conclusion on the deposit area here. So it's kind of complicated, but it gives a nice overview once this is actually done. I wanted to say a little bit about aggregation, and I want to use titanium as a case because it's a bit challenging, and we have quite a lot. It's a nice Norwegian commodity. We have at least 10 significant deposits containing titanium minerals in Norway. They are reported, the most important ones are reported into this Fennoscandian ore deposit database, but they're very different in character. So deposits may carry ilmenite as a main commodity. It may be deposits with ilmenite as a byproduct, as we saw from this Bjerkreim-Sogndal intrusion. And then we have deposits with rutile as a main commodity. And what you choose of these deposits will have extremely varying grades. And as UNFC does not carry grades, this poses a bit of challenges, or at least you need to make some decisions on the way. So we have also projects in all kinds of stages. So we have a producing mine, Telnes, in South Norway, producing around 5% of the world's titanium. It's the biggest titanium producer in Europe. We have a hard rock rutile project in a place called Engebøfjellet, which is actually in banking feasibility stage. So it's to come online within a short time. Then, as I showed you before, we have the Bjerkreim-Sogndal prospects or deposits, which are exploration targets. And then we have a lots of historical extraction sites, primarily for ilmenite, but also for rutile. So we have lots of different kinds of geology, and we have lots of different kinds of stages on the projects. So putting up like this is just these are mainly survey estimates. I have to tell you a little bit about the Telnes is not a listed company, so they don't have compliant figures to present. If they report any reserve data, they are confidential. So the survey is left with our own numbers for this deposit, which of course means that we cannot resolve the different kind of G resources in here. There's a closed mine also. There's also a world-class deposit, the Storgang deposit, still containing 60 million tons. Also here we are not sure about what is G2 and what is G3. And as we saw, Bjerkreim-Sogndal is G3. Then comes all the rutile deposits. For the Engebøfjellet deposit, we can use the Crisco conversion, so that's kind of easy. And then we have closed mines and non-exploited mines as well. So we have been doing the UNFC exercise on these commodities. As I told you, we cannot resolve the G codes, the G resources in Telnes, but we know there are G1 resources in there because they are producing. There are also G2 and G3 certainly within the 700 million tons or 570 million tons. Same for the Storgang deposit, we cannot resolve, but the remaining part are actually fairly easy to classify. But how to display this? There are different ways to show aggregation. You can aggregate on project basis, number of projects, but it doesn't really give you good strategic material to plan your future on. If we want to do just tonnages, we will have to do it like this. We have to separate, for instance, ilmenite, where you would have 18% TiO2 from the rutile, where you would have 4% TiO2, because you cannot compare these two kind of resources. So we'll have to do this kind of aggregation for both for individual type of resources. So it's complicated on the geology because we cannot resolve the numbers. So I have to group the deposit, the ilmenite deposit, into G1 plus G2 plus G3. The G1 is in there somewhere. In terms of ENF, it's much easier, and you can see that we have 49% of all our ilmenite resources are actually in sort of in a viable state. We can do the same for rutile. Let's see, comes here. It's a cleaner picture because we don't have all these aggregated G codes. So G1 to G4, it's easy to see. We have 5% of the rutile resources are actually in measured resources. And also here, the ENF is a nice picture. We can see that that more than half of the known resources are actually on the move. The way we would prefer to do this is to use a kind of metal summary. That means that we can join the ilmenite deposits, whether it's main metal or byproduct, with the rutile deposit into one aggregated summary. This can be done. You can use weighted averages on your grades, like we did in Minerals for EU, or we can use the clean metal summary that I have used here, which is probably more illustrative. The only thing is that as UNFC does not carry UNFC and does not have a does not carry grades and does not have a placeholder for grades, we need to carry them into the aggregations. So it's a cleaner picture, but still, because we cannot resolve all the G data, the geology is a little bit of a mess. So ENF, very nice. We can see that 62% of all the ilmenite or all the titanium resources are actually, you can add the 14% in the red, are actually being handled in on the move, as I said. Just one last slide. We tried to do the metals inventory for the most important parts of our deposits, our known deposits. It's 237 deposits in here. So this is our national metals inventory, maybe not including the clear G4s, which we have no way of adding any volumes to. Again, you can see the picture is pretty messy because of the poorly resolved G1 to G3 grades. So we have one G1 column, but we also have a G2 including G1, and we also have a G1 included in a G2 plus G3 column here. So, but you can see what is being produced. The G1 things are we're producing iron, we're producing titanium, and we also have feasibility stage projects on titanium, and we also have feasibility stage projects on copper, which is coming online, and there must be measured resources in the Nusia copper deposits at the red arrow up there, but I couldn't find the number, so they will also be G1 resources in there. So that was a little bit about our challenges in making the summary, and some examples. I think this is it for me. Please, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. I will try to send this back to. I'll try to send it back to Tom. I'll do that here, maybe.
Okay. Yes, I've got nothing else to show now. That's the end of the I think the presented material. So you've got some time now for discussion if anyone wants to raise any particular points. I mean, one thing I think I will just sort of try and sum up a little bit. I mean, I think we've seen several really interesting different ways that different organisations have used to kind of use UNFC to kind of classify mineral resources, to kind of make assessments of geological stocks. And I think that's been really interesting to see the kind of different approaches that are taken, which sometimes have been led based on the kind of different types of data. I think it's been also really interesting to see how different commodities throw up different issues. For example, sand and gravel needs to be dealt with in a very different way to metallic mineral commodities, which I think emphasises that you need a level of expertise when undertaking this exercise in terms of geology, but also in terms of the kind of the socioeconomic and technical aspects, the kind of minerals focused side of things when doing this. And that's really important. Although we've kind of seen a lot of the really good examples that sometimes look quite simple when you present them, actually they can be really complicated. So it's always really important to have a level of expertise in terms of understanding the individual mineral resources. And we've seen as well that there is currently data gaps which also exist. The studies that have been done in terms of conversion have been done based on really good exploration data, but of course we need to understand where the gaps are, where we haven't that exploration data, and of course there needs to be continued effort into gathering that kind of basic exploration data to understand those deposits where we aren't quite sure of where they are yet. So that's really important to consider. Harmonisation is one aspect, but also continue to develop sort of knowledge on mineral resources is another very important one. And to sort of finally say, of course, in terms of Henrik made a very good point there in terms of aggregation, in terms of how we deal with byproducts and co-products. That this shows that these issues can be very complex, and aggregation is certainly a difficult one, and also how to deal with byproducts and co-products. And this shows that this is currently developing. So that's all I've got to really say on that. I see that there is one comment regarding a different way of developing grade issues using reference points for future production. So yeah, I don't know, different ways. There's any different ways of doing it. So unless anyone wants to add anything extra, make any questions, clarify anything, I haven't got anything else to say. No? Excellent. Well, I presume that means everyone's happy with what we presented. But like I said, this will all be available on the ORAMA website. And if you're interested, we've covered this in really quick detail today. And these are some really complex, in-depth issues, which hopefully we've covered much more comprehensively in the various reports that the ORAMA project has produced. So please have a look at that, and please continue to engage until the end of the project, which will be in Raw Materials Week this November. So thanks very much, everyone. Unless anyone else wants to say anything else, that's it from me.
Thank you.